Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. It started with a name. A simple, ordinary name that popped up on my husband's phone one evening. Sarah. I barely glanced at it. Just an old friend, I thought. But when he saw me looking, he snatched his phone like a teenager hiding something. My stomach tightened. Who was Sarah? I had never heard of her before. And why did he act like that? I told myself not to overthink it, but that name haunted me. A few days later, I saw him texting late at night. He wasn't just typing, he was smiling. The kind of smile I hadn't seen in a while. My heart pounded. I waited until he fell asleep, then grabbed his phone. My hands shook as I scrolled through their messages. And that's when I saw it. Sarah knew details about my life that only my husband should have known. Things I had told him in confidence. Things I thought were ours alone. My breath caught in my throat. Who was this woman? I confronted him the next morning. Who's Sarah? His face went pale. Just a friend, he said too quickly. I crossed my arms. Then why does she know about my doctor's appointment? About my job interview? He hesitated. That hesitation spoke louder than words. She's my best friend, he finally admitted. My heart dropped. My husband had a best friend? And he had never mentioned her? I couldn't stop thinking about it. I had been his wife for 5 years, yet I had never even heard Sarah's name. How could a best friend be kept secret? That night, I did what I swore I'd never do. I checked his phone again. The more I read, the more my stomach twisted. He told her about our arguments, our finances, even intimate moments. She knew everything. More than my own family did. More than my closest friends. More than me. I felt sick. I had shared my life with a man who had shared our life with someone else. I wanted to scream, to cry, to demand answers. But instead, I stayed silent, observing. Watching him. Seeing every lie that had once gone unnoticed. And that's when I realized Sarah wasn't just a friend. She was something more. But what? And why had he hidden her from me all this time? I needed answers. I couldn't just let this go. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I searched for Sarah online. My hands trembled as I typed her name into social media. And there she was. A woman with a bright smile. Someone who seemed normal. But as I scrolled through her posts, my blood ran cold. There were subtle mentions of my husband. Inside jokes, cryptic captions. One even said, "Some bonds can't be broken, no matter what." My heart pounded. What did that mean? Then I saw them, photos of Sarah and my husband. Not just one or two, but dozens. Some from years ago, some recent. Pictures of them laughing at a coffee shop, at a concert, even on what looked like vacations. How had I never known? I checked the timestamps. Some of these were taken when he told me he was on work trips. He had lied. My throat tightened. But why? What was their real relationship? That night, I confronted him again. This time, I wasn't asking. Why didn't you ever tell me about her? I demanded, shoving my phone in his face. He looked at the pictures and sighed like he had been caught in a lie he was tired of keeping. It's not what you think, he said. But his voice was weak. Unconvincing. Then tell me what it is, I snapped. He hesitated. And that's when I knew, whatever this was, it was big. After what felt like an eternity, he finally spoke. Sarah and I, we've been best friends for years. Before you and I met. I stared at him. That didn't explain anything. So why hide her? Why keep your messages a secret? He ran a hand through his hair. Because I knew you wouldn't understand. My stomach churned. Understand what? His silence was deafening. I wasn't sure I was ready for the answer. She's the one I talk to about everything, he admitted. When I'm stressed. When I'm confused. When we fight. My chest ached. So, she's your emotional wife? I asked bitterly. He looked away. It's not like that. But it was. He had given Sarah a part of him that should have been mine. And the worst part? She knew my marriage better than I did. The days after that conversation were like a fog. He kept apologizing, but nothing felt real. Every time I looked at him, I wondered how much of our life he had shared with her. Was I just the wife on paper, while Sarah was the one who truly understood him? I watched him closely, looking for signs of their bond in every word he spoke, every smile he gave me. Was I losing my husband to someone who wasn't me? Then came the day Sarah showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen when I heard the doorbell. My husband looked nervous as he opened the door, revealing her. She smiled like she was visiting an old friend. And that smile, something about it made my skin crawl. I tried to act normal, but I could feel my heart pounding. As she sat down at our table, I couldn't help but notice how comfortable she seemed in my house, in my life. She belonged here. Sarah and I made small talk, but the tension in the room was unbearable. Finally, she slipped up. She mentioned something about an argument my husband and I had months ago, something no one but us should have known. I froze. My husband shot her a look, but it was too late. She had already revealed too much. How did she know that? The pieces started to fall into place. She had been more involved in our marriage than I could ever have imagined. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stayed up, thinking about everything I had learned. I had trusted him with my heart, my life, but he had given pieces of it to someone else. Sarah was more than just a best friend. She was his emotional partner. And as much as I hated to admit it, I couldn't compete with that. She knew him better than I ever could. The worst part was, I wasn't even sure if I could ask him to stop. Had I lost him to her forever? I confronted him once more, this time with no pretenses. You need to choose, I told him, my voice trembling. Me or her? He looked at me, eyes filled with guilt. I don't want to lose you, he whispered, but I could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Then why is she still a part of our life? I asked. He remained silent. And in that silence, I knew the truth. Sarah had become more than a secret. She was a complication I didn't know how to navigate. After our confrontation, everything felt strained. My husband tried harder to make things right, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. I watched him closely, noticing the way he would check his phone, the way his face softened when he texted Sarah. I told myself I was overreacting, but deep down, I knew something wasn't quite right. The more I thought about it, the more I realized Sarah wasn't just his best friend. She had become an emotional anchor, and I wasn't sure if I could compete with that. It wasn't until a weekend trip that everything changed. My husband and I had planned a getaway, just the two of us. But as we were packing, I saw a message from Sarah pop up on his phone. It was innocent at first, just checking in, but then the tone shifted. I miss you. Can't wait to see you again soon, it read. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to read more, but I did. And that's when I saw it. A plan for them to meet up, not just as friends, but something more. My heart shattered. I was no longer his priority. Sarah was. I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, I faced him again. My voice was steady, but inside I was shaking. Are you having an affair with her? I asked bluntly. The color drained from his face. He didn't deny it. It's complicated, he said, looking away. But there was nothing complicated about it. He had crossed a line with Sarah that I couldn't uncross. The truth was out, and my heart ached with the realization that I had been sharing my life with someone who didn't belong to me alone. He finally confessed. I never meant for it to happen, he said. Sarah and I have always been close. But when we started spending more time together, things just shifted. I never meant to hurt you. His words felt like a hollow apology. You should have told me, I whispered. He nodded. I was scared. Scared of losing you, scared of losing her. But it's clear now that I've already lost everything. The pain in his voice was real, but it didn't make it easier. It wasn't just Sarah he had betrayed, it was me. That night, I lay awake for hours, replaying every moment in my mind. Could I forgive him? Could I accept Sarah in our lives? Every part of me wanted to walk away, to never look back. But there was a part of me that still loved him, despite everything. So, I made a decision. I would give him a chance, but only if he chose me. If he was willing to let go of Sarah. It wasn't easy, and I knew it would take time, but I had to try. I wasn't sure if he would, but I was prepared to take that risk. The next morning, I looked my husband in the eye and gave him a choice. If you love me, you'll cut Sarah out of your life. My voice was steady, but my heart pounded. His face twisted in pain. I don't want to hurt you, he said, but I can't just erase her. She's been there for me longer than anyone. His words felt like daggers. Longer than anyone. Longer than me. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't asking him to choose. I was just finally accepting the truth. Days passed in silence. He tried to act normal, like nothing had changed, but I could feel the distance growing. I could see the weight of my ultimatum pressing down on him. Every time his phone buzzed, I held my breath. Was it Sarah? Was he still talking to her behind my back? The paranoia was eating me alive. I had given him a choice, but deep down, I already knew what he would choose. And it wouldn't be me. Then it happened. One night, when he was in the shower, I checked his phone. My hands shook as I opened his messages. And there it was. Sarah, I miss you too. I don't want to lose you. My breath caught in my throat. After everything, after all the promises, he had still chosen her. I felt sick. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room. But instead, I just sat there, staring at the message. I had my answer. When he came out of the bathroom, he saw me holding his phone. He didn't even try to lie. His shoulders slumped, his face full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he whispered. But sorry wasn't enough. "I deserve more," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. And for the first time, I truly believed it. I didn't wait for him to respond. I turned around, walked to the bedroom, and started packing my bags. I had spent too long fighting for someone who wasn't fighting for me. The next morning, I left. He begged me to stay, to talk, to give him another chance. But I was done talking. "If you couldn't choose me then, you won't choose me now," I told him. And I walked out the door. It wasn't easy. My heart felt like it was being ripped in half. But I knew this pain was temporary. Staying in a marriage where I was second place? That pain would have lasted forever. The first few days were the hardest. I kept waiting for my phone to ring, for him to show up and beg me to come home. But he didn't. And maybe that was the real answer I had been searching for all along. I cried. I screamed into my pillow. I let myself feel everything. But then, slowly, something shifted. The pain didn't disappear, but it didn't control me anymore. I had lost my husband, but I had found something more important myself. Weeks passed, and then one night, my phone buzzed. It was Sarah. My stomach turned as I read her message. "I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to be there for him. But I see now that I was part of the problem. I'm sorry." I stared at the screen, unsure of how to respond. Was she truly sorry? Did it even matter anymore? I took a deep breath and typed back. "I hope you find what you're looking for, but it won't be at my expense." Then, I blocked her number. I didn't hear from my husband for months. Then, out of the blue, he sent me an email. "I lost you, and I lost her too. I thought I could hold on to both, but in the end, I have nothing. I regret everything." I read his words, feeling nothing. No anger, no sadness, just peace. He had made his choices. And so had I. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Life didn't magically get easier overnight, but I started rebuilding. I focused on myself, my happiness, my dreams. I surrounded myself with people who truly valued me. And one day, I woke up and realized I hadn't thought about them in weeks. The scars were still there, but they no longer defined me. I wasn't the woman who lost her husband to another woman's influence. I was the woman who chose herself. And that was more powerful than any love I had ever known. Looking back, I don't regret walking away. It was painful, yes, but it was necessary. I deserved more than to be someone's second choice. I deserved a love that didn't come with conditions. And if I had to go through heartbreak to learn that, then so be it. Because now I know my worth. And I will never settle for anything less ever again. Thank you for listening to my story until now. If you liked the video, please support it by subscribing and liking.